Hi everyone, Caoimhin here from MTU's Blackrock Castle Observatory. We're here on Friday the 19th, looking into the south at just a bit after 6 o'clock. So just as the sun is setting on Friday the 19th, the moon should be nice and high to the south. As the sun sets, of course, everything will appear to move to the west as we turn, so the moon will appear to drift past the south towards the southwest, and Mars will appear just a little west of that. Mars is, of course, one of the most famous objects in the sky. It's our closest neighbour, it's the red planet, it's the planet that's received some of the most attention, both in real science and in science fiction over the past few decades. So we will be taking a closer look at Mars tonight. But there are still new things to learn. Even though with the software like Stellarium, we can predict the positions of stars and planets very far into the future, once we humans get involved, things get a little bit less predictable. So even though we know there is a lander from NASA on its way to Mars, the Perseverance rover and the Ingenuity helicopter, they're both scheduled to land on Mars as of yesterday. So watching this video, you may know whether or not NASA had a successful landing on Mars. But of course, NASA has had many landings on Mars and indeed many missions to other planets. The group, the club of nations and groups and organizations that have made it to other planets, it's a pretty exclusive club. For example, with Mars, several nations have made attempts, and if we count the attempted missions that crashed into Mars or flew past Mars instead of orbiting, we've got a grand total of nine countries or organizations that have made it to or onto the red planet. And the group of nations that have successfully landed on the surface is even slimmer. But that group, that club, may be growing very, very soon. So just before we take a closer look, the moon nice and high towards the south-southwest, and Mars just a little bit to the west of that. Of course, over the next few days, the moon will continue to move away, but if you can find the shape of Orion, Taurus, and the Seven Sisters, well, the Seven Sisters are going to be very close to the red dot of Mars. So we'll take a closer look, and here we can see Mars with its two moons, Phobos and Deimos. We'll bring it back to the 19th. We can predict where the moons Phobos and Deimos will be because their orbits are so regular. However, missions to Mars are generally a bit less predictable, especially in the early days of missions to Mars. So for example, the European Space Agency sent an orbiter to Mars along with a United Kingdom lander, the Beagle 2. But the Beagle crashed. The UK still counts as one of the nations that has brought a piece of scientific instrumentation all the way to the surface of Mars, but that piece of instrumentation wasn't able to operate. And it may be down to the dust clouds on Mars, which have given difficulties to some missions. Looking at Mars right here, this is what we would see in clear weather. Mars very rarely has massive sandstorms, but occasionally it does have storms so massive that the entire atmosphere is filled with this orange-yellow powdery sand and dust. Not only can this block the sunlight trying to get to solar panels, but it changes the dynamics of the atmosphere. There's a lot more drag generated when you have these little bits of dust, and this can affect the parachutes and retro thrusters that are needed to make the landings on Mars soft so that they don't destroy whatever's trying to land there. NASA and Roscosmos have successfully landed things on the surface of Mars, and they may not be the only ones by the end of this year, thanks to the Chinese mission Tianwen-1. So Tianwen-1 is a multi-part mission. It includes an orbiter, which is now orbiting around Mars, China's first ever Martian orbiter, but it also brings with it a lander and a rover. And if those landings and rovings are successful, which we should find out in late May, then there will be another country with a physical automated presence on the surface of the red planet. Of course, even getting into orbit around Mars is very, very difficult. There's still very few countries that have successfully orbited Mars, and for example, the Japanese space agency JAXA, they had an attempted orbit of Mars, which ended up being more of a flyby, as the intended orbiter broke free of the gravity and ended up independently orbiting the sun. Luckily, it did skim past Mars and it was able to give us a little bit of extra information, and hopefully the Tianwen orbiter will give us plenty of information even if its lander and rover don't operate, along with HOPE, the United Arab Emirates orbiter. So HOPE is the first orbiter from the United Arab Emirates, the first orbiter from any Arab country to get into successful orbit around Mars. And even more impressive, this was the United Arab Emirates' first ever attempt. Most other first attempts don't go so well, even from big, powerful companies like the European Space Agency and NASA. Early attempts often failed. It took NASA several attempts before their first successful flyby back in the 1960s, and several more attempts before they had a successful landing. But Mars is a big planet, and getting landers and rovers on various different parts of the surface is incredibly important for us to truly understand Mars's history. For example, at this section right here. So we're now looking at Mars at almost midnight, so it's getting very, very low in the horizon. In fact, this is just about as low as I'll be able to show you. And just at the top here, we can see this gash, this scar, which is a Great Valley or Canyon, very similar to the Grand Canyon here on Earth and thought to be formed by flowing water in the past. In fact, these flatter, sandier areas may once have been oceans, but there's no liquid water left on the surface. And even satellites and probes with ground-penetrating radar still have a tough time figuring out for sure where and how much liquid is present. So by getting down onto the surface and really digging into the ground, which is one thing the Perseverance rover being sent by Mars is intending to do, well, that might give us a better idea if anything is there under the surface. You can see here that at almost midnight, Mars is just about to disappear behind a tree. But if you were in a clear area, you may be able to follow Mars closer to the horizon. But the closer to the horizon Mars gets, the more of our own atmosphere you need to look through. Mars's atmosphere, bar those occasional sandstorms and dust storms, it's generally quite see-through. It's generally quite a transparent atmosphere without any big fluffy clouds. So to minimize any aberrant effects from atmosphere, it is best to see Mars when it's high in the sky. So it is good to start as early as you can. As we move back to sunset here, you'll see that Mars does indeed appear in the sky while there is still an orange-yellow glow. So you can start finding Mars, at least with your eyes, as early as, well, here we go, just about 6:30, and there's Mars still visible. But if we take a closer look at Mars here, with all of that extra light from the sun, it is going to affect our view. So especially like this, we can see there's a lot of extra blue sky, and that's going to make your view a little bit more difficult. But you can certainly find Mars with your eyes this early, get ready, get your telescope set up, and then you'll have the most time possible to view Mars in detail. The differences between Earth's atmosphere and Mars's atmosphere, they can have effects on landers and rovers trying to slow their descent onto the surface of Mars, but they would also have a great effect on anything trying to fly in the atmosphere of Mars. And that's what the Ingenuity helicopter, the Ingenuity drone that that NASA is sending to Mars, that's what they're hoping to accomplish. They're hoping to fly in the atmosphere of another planet. So even though the first flyby of Mars was back in the 1960s, the first landing on Mars was back in the 1970s. Not only have we never flown on Mars, but we've never flown anywhere other than the Earth. And I am currently waiting on tenterhooks, trying to find out if the Ingenuity helicopter has actually flown. But if you're watching this video released on the 19th, you should already have an answer from NASA. And if you'd like to get further updates on these events in the future, then make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the blue bell icon to receive the most up-to-date notifications. So I hope you all get a chance to see Mars over the weekend and hopefully get a chance to see news of more successful landings.